How are you doing?
I'm doing fairly well. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. I am a fan of your work. I totally went through everything, and I see two very distinct styles coming from you. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I think there's a very stark aesthetic difference between my illustrations versus my sculptural style. Um,
Yes, that's exactly what I noticed right away. I mean,
uh,
right off the bat. It's like this cute, cartoony world where like the gore is kind of Looney Tunes-ish, and then it gets really dark and there's a major contrast, right?
yes, yes, I really try to within both my illustrations and my sculptures to try to play with kind of the tension between I guess subject and form. And I guess ultimately, I'm I'm interested in work that both appeals to the senses, but also kind of creates a feeling of, I don't know, aversion or repulsion. So things that, while beautiful, may not be easy to look at.
Yes. Yes. Could you explain a little bit about your work? Kind of describe both sides of the spectrum for people who haven't seen it yet. How would you describe it?
Um, well, I describe my illustration style as um, kind of a gritty hyper realist, generally figurative art, often centered on the feminine form. Um,
Yes.
whereas a lot of my sculptures, I tend to incorporate a lot softer, bubbly color palettes, and better described as more of a pop surrealist body horror.
Yes.
Um, it's also has ended up on various Tumblr pages under the hashtag pastel gorecore, which I guess is an aesthetic subculture.
Yes. I started noticing recently the pastel goth, like this new wave of pastel goth, and it's like really adorable vampire stuff, kind of like kawaii mixed with goth. I think it's cute. If I were younger, I'd be doing it.
Yeah, I think I really didn't come to appreciate bright colors or pastels or pink until probably a few years ago. I think, like a lot of people, you know, I was raised as a young girl in a patriarchal society, and pink was associated with femininity. And I think a lot of people will distance themselves from things that they might associate with, like, I don't know, with femininity. And I think
For
finding a way
sure.
to like love pink outside of the gender norms that are attached to it has been a really awesome journey for me.
Yeah, so how do you think that started? Just the idea of maybe I'm okay with pink. Maybe I'll use pink. Maybe I'll make like a whole lot of pink. How did
Um,
that happen or start?
how did it start? Um, probably has to go back to, I call it the pink room. Um, one of uh, my bedroom in one of my past houses that I had moved into, the person who had rented the room before me was also an artist, also very into pink, had painted the entire room pink. And
Mhm.
after having that bedroom for about a year, pink just really began to grow on. I know that seems kind of benign, but I don't know, when you spend most of your time like indoors doing crafts, like the atmosphere that like the shade of a color on a wall creates for you can be like everything. And I think that's been a huge contributor to kind of the development of like that aesthetic within my own art style.
Definitely. I completely relate to the whole pink thing because I have 5 older sisters, and I was probably the most tomboy out of our, like, second there are almost 2 generations within our generation, and I was, like, against pink anything, and then one day found out that our whole bedroom was gonna be painted pink, and we had bedspreads with pink hearts covering them, and I was like, "Okay, you guys are trying to ruin my life." And then, you know, I think 15 years later, I started liking pink, and now I like it. But,
Yeah, I think it's wild. Oftentimes it's not even, you know, the color itself, it's like all of that gendered baggage that we have tied to it. And
it's what you're supposed to be. Yeah,
yeah,
it's the idea of that's supposed to be your favorite color till you're 12 or, you know? I get it, I get it. So, why would you say that your work takes on kind of a horror twist? Albeit cheeky, albeit, the gore that you're talking about. Why? Why is it there?
I think the central theme throughout all of my work is really a focus on bodies and embodiment. And I think with the use of like various gore elements, it helps me to kind of, I don't know, create an almost visual representation of like the impact that uh, like trauma in all of its various forms has on individual embodiment. Um, Another theme that also plays heavily in my work is the use of the gaze. Um, not gay, but um, so I will often, in my drawing, for example, I will have figures which will directly engage with the viewer visually. Um, and in my sculpture, I also incorporate lots of eyes. And I think calling it kind of calls into question the relationship between a work of art and its viewer, and in turn, kind of, I don't know, in a way makes us question our own positionality in relation to the works.
True. Like, are you allowed to be looking at this right now? Are you, you might be looking at a person, a character, whatever figure is in that piece that you've made. You're looking at them while they're in kind of a compromising position.
But
They're all
yeah, I mean,
bloody. They're not
it's
so comfy.
the body unbounded. It's, you know, the contents of the body which otherwise go unseen. Um, I think really interesting, kind of a little bit of a anecdote, but there is an anthropologist named Mary Douglas who wrote about the concept of the sacred and the profane. And she argued that dirt is just matter that has no place. So the idea of things that things that we find gory or disruptive to our understanding of the way that the world works or the way that a form is supposed to be presented. I think that that tension, that like kind of un unsymbolizable, unintegratable with our understanding of the body as it's normally presented.
Do you ever get people who are kind of uncomfortable and can't handle your work?
Oh yeah, I mean, people tell me all the time that it's gross or it makes them uncomfortable or it's not something that would be traditionally viewed as fine art.
And how do you explain yourself to them? I know what you mean about the fine art. Yeah.
Um, like I think that that art, good art, is supposed to supposed to be provocative, as in it's supposed to elicit a provocation. It's supposed to create feelings in you that you otherwise wouldn't experience without that stimulation. I think,
Exactly.
if it's not making you uncomfortable, then it's not doing what I intended it to do.
Right, right. It can't just be this is adorable. It's like, oh, there's a beating heart sticking out of it, but that's cool, you know? um, what's your favorite piece up to date?
My favorite, oh, I don't even know. Why would
Well,
you do
before
this
you
to
choose your
me?
favorite piece, then do you feel more connected to your sculpture or your drawings?
Um, that's that's a difficult one for me because I feel connected to them in different ways.
Hmm.
I guess with the sculptures, it feels more more immediate, more tangible. I have a small porcelain half naked woman staring at me from across the room
Hmm.
right now.
Yeah.
Whereas drawings, oftentimes, like, once you finish it, uh, you might take a picture of it and catalog it and put it in a portfolio and forget about it for a year.
Hmm.
Um, I think it's hard. I think particularly with drawing, my relationship with it changes once it's finished. It's almost like it takes on an identity of its own, and it's no longer the act of creating anymore. It's the thing.
Do you notice like a different mindset or a different mood that leads you in one direction or the other when you're choosing between the two?
Um, yeah, I think when it comes to drawing, I really came into it as a kind of coping mechanism, or a way of, like, processing emotions that I didn't really feel comfortable, or, like, feel like I had the words to articulate. So I think oftentimes some of my more raw, grittier feelings come out in my drawings. Um, Whereas with sculpture, I feel like there's a little bit less of an emotional investment, and but in that way, it also creates a little bit more room for playfulness
Yes.
and, experimentation. So I have a lot of pieces that, I've made and modified 50 or 100 times because I just keep coming up with other ideas for how it could be.
Yeah, I definitely felt like your sculptures, and for most people it might sound completely odd to say this because of the subject matter, but they just seem so lighthearted. And there's like this kind of joyfulness to them, even though there's blood and organs and whatnot. And I guess some people can't see that, but when I look at your work as two separate entities coming from the same person, um, I see that difference in mood or difference in comedy or like a tongue-in-cheek take that kind of thing. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a kind of a cheekiness to it. Um,
So even though it's cheeky, like if we put it into the horror world, it would be, I don't know. I hope you don't take this the wrong way because mean it very positively. Like it would be campy
oh,
and
I
fun. So, what role do you think horror plays in society today, and how do you put your art into that?
What role does horror play in society today? I think horror plays a very important role in our society, because it's a way of giving a kind of a visual discourse to, you know, our collective fears. And I think increasingly more we're seeing use of the horror genre as a vehicle for exploring like subjects like trauma as well. And I think that like trauma is such an integral part of, I think, horror, from the like, you know, the campy visceral, like, you know, physical horror of like a gore or a slasher film, versus the more slower paced kind of psychological horrors you might see in, like, I don't know, like Parasite, for example, would be like a contemporary example.
Yeah. And I think people forget that a lot of movies are in the horror category because they try to not call them horror. They try to call them thrillers or, you know, I don't know, adventure, whatever the heck they're trying to call it when it's like a real serial killer or um that's to me that's still horror. Just because it's not a slasher film, it's still horror to me. So
Yeah, I mean, answering the question, what is horror, is about as futile as trying to answer the question, what is art?
exactly, exactly. And for some people, watching watching like a what are those called? Romance.
Oh, like rom-coms.
Yes. So for some people, that's like a horror movie, you know? But it all depends on where you're coming from with your experiences and all of that.
Yeah,
So
I get that. The long-running debate with a friend of mine about whether Jodorowsky's Holy Mountain is a horror movie or not.
yeah, there all of those common arguments. Is this a Christmas movie or is it a Halloween movie or is you know? But so what if you're okay with answering this, do you have any fears that you feel contribute to your work?
Any fears? I mean, yeah, yes. And I will expound further. Um, I think, yeah, some of the fears that I explore in my work is, I think, the relationship between like bodily trauma and recognition.
Mhm.
And I mean recognition in like, in a more, I guess, Hegelian sense. So it's about not only being viewed, but like the relationship between the viewer being viewed while viewing. If that makes sense, it's like it's kind of meta, but yeah, I think ultimately what it seeks to do is question like what is subjectivity, like what is this thing that differentiates the subject from an object. And some of my pieces, it's a little, you know, the boundary is blurred and it's a little less obvious. um, and I think the way that kind of plays into some of my fears, particularly as it relates to social media and my use of social media, is
Mhm.
this fear that like I may go my entire life without any real recognition for what I do, and that, you know, that can be scary for a lot of people. You know, my tiny Instagram account with what 300 followers could be the only the only record that I've even really existed. Like, if I wasn't taking pictures and sharing them with strangers on the internet, would anybody even know like how rich my internal life is?
And the meaning and the concept behind your work. It's not a trinket. There's something happening there. I understand what you're saying because I did a whole project with I'll keep this short because this is not about me, but I did a whole project for the Day of the Dead where I had people make an altar for themselves as if they were dead. And they were supposed to design their altar the way the family would have designed it if they died, right? And as they were making it, some people were like, oh, this is so cool. I would rather design my own. I want it to be accurate. I want it to be really what is important to me. I don't want them to just put, you know, pan dulce on the table and say that that's it. Like, I want it to be exactly what I love. And then other people had a really hard time with it, and they were crying putting it together. They were talking about how, wow, I can't believe this is all I have to put up here. I I should have trophies, I should have this and that. And they were really beating themselves up over it. So it was really interesting to see how everybody reacted differently to creating their altar. And it it was based on exactly what you're saying. What am I going to be known for? Are people going to understand that I was deep, or do they just think this is cute? Or something that I was told in art school, well, you're crafty. You're not an artist, you're just crafty. Well, if there's a concept behind it, I don't care if you're just crocheting. If there's a concept, that's art. So I'm hearing you completely. So when you look at something that you decide is going to become one of your pieces, what is it about that object, and how does the process work in your mind to say this is what it's going to become?
I usually start with an everyday object. Like, for example, I just started a project involving a toothbrush. So I have a toothbrush that was getting a little old. I decided to switch out for another one, and instead of throwing it out, I took the bristles out and replaced it with tiny little teeth. Um,
Oh my gosh, it's brilliant. I
so
love it.
it's a combination of, yeah, it just incorporating found objects that are within my domestic sphere normally. Um,
Talk
and
about
other
visceral.
times it's about exploring a particular process. So while I am university educated, I'm not an art student. Um, so I've done most of my artistic development independently. So in terms of like my sculpture style, a lot of that has been a process of trial and error, and just exploring different methods for trying to create different looks. And uh,
I think that's great. I think it's kind of, uh, this might be the most controversial thing I ever say on this show. I think sometimes it could be a little bit limiting to be formally trained, because I went through art school and I went through all of photography in college, and I didn't get good or conceptual or deep until I went through forensic training, which was completely not about art at all. But it took my brain somewhere. You know what I mean? So sometimes it's not, you don't learn it where you're supposed to. It's in you already. You have to develop it. And I think that's the more powerful way to go sometimes.
Yeah, it's I mean, definitely no regrets about the educational path that I've taken. I think I've learned a lot, and it's definitely informed my art style in ways that I couldn't even articulate. But yeah, I do feel pretty silly going you know, thousands of dollars into student loan debt to realize actually I do want to be an artist.
Yeah.
Um,
And it's self-fulfilling. It's a good way to go. I think you'll be okay. You
no,
make some
it's
really
great.
awesome
I
stuff.
mean, I I've fought it tooth and nail for years, and I think honestly, just with the pandemic and being in quarantine for basically a year,
Yeah.
it's really opened me up to start focusing on like just being more disciplined with my art
Yeah.
instead of using it as just a coping mechanism.
Right. I think that's happening for a lot of people right now because they're home. They already cleaned their house. They already got rid of everything. They already like, what else is there to do? And they're finally doing something that they probably always wanted to try. And a lot of people are in that boat in different ways. So, Kay, have you ever had a paranormal experience?
A, a paranormal experience. Hmm.
Have you seen a ghost? Did like a shadow man come to your bed and say, you should put a beating heart sticking out of a precious moments figure? You should do this, you know?
um, no, I don't think I've ever been visited by a ghost per se. I do. This is it's really it speaks more to my own neuroticism, but I have
Tell
this
me.
house plant that I have been carrying around with me for years. Like I've moved across state lines and brought this house plant with me. I've gone on long bus rides with the plant on my lap.
Yes.
I have this house plant that my great grandmother gave me before she passed away, and I haven't been able to bring myself to get rid of it or to let it die. And I am not a green thumb at all. I have killed every plant I've ever owned except this plant. And
Wow.
I feel like, in a way, it's not that my grandma's spirit is in the plant, but I feel like if I let the plant die, I'm symbolically killing my grandma, which is a little morbid. I been trying to break that association by giving it its own identity. I
Uh-huh.
named my houseplant Mitch and put googly eyes on the pot. So it's, basically its own person now.
Well, that's good. That's progress. Maybe I wonder where Mitch came from. I wonder why you came up with that name. You're going to hear a story one day and you're going to
um,
be like, did you know that your grandma had her first boyfriend's name was Mitch? And
yeah,
I
I,
feel like
I
it
don't
came
know.
from somewhere.
Yeah, so maybe not the most like paranormal, but still, connections with the dead.
It's in the realm. It doesn't have to be a ghost knocking on your door for it to be, some kind of connection. Do you believe in that stuff?
I believe in that stuff. Um, I I don't know what to believe. I'm just so full of questions and not a lot of answers.
Your work is like, your work is about human fear and human gore, not necessarily paranormal stuff. So it's interesting to hear your take on it. So if there was If there was a horror movie character who you could have in your art studio with you for a day, who would you choose and what would you make together?
Hmm. Yeah, there you go with all those hard questions. Um,
Like, I want you to say Freddy Krueger and I are gonna make dream catchers together or something.
no, no, but I did have a dream once that Freddy Krueger and I were friends and we like played tennis. It was very wholesome. Um,
You played tennis with Freddy Krueger. Did you win?
I don't know. I mean, it was a friendly game.
That's awesome. That might be better than having a ghost story.
I'm sorry. What was the question? I'm going off on tangents.
Oh, it was if you could choose any horror movie character to have in your art studio, who would it be and what would you make?
Ooh, probably. Um, I cannot. I cannot remember their name, and I feel like a jerk about this. But, the person uh, who designed the fawn suit for Pan's Labyrinth, I would love to meet them and see that suit and reverse engineer that suit. Um,
Yeah.
because yeah, I really, really have just enormous respect for like people that work in costume and makeup and practical effects. Because it's just such an amazing blending of like all these different artistic mediums that I'm really passionate about, and seeing them come together and create these like fantastical characters.
Yeah. Guillermo del Toro is like, there's nobody better. I love him. He's like one of my favorite people in the world. But he designed all the monsters, Pan's Labyrinth. I mean, what is it? Hellboy, all the good stuff. But I went to one of his exhibits at the LACMA, and like I'll never forget that day. I remember every minute of that day. It's um it's just so awesome to see somebody's work that you appreciate, you know. And he also had his whole collection there. So it was like everything that he owns that is just cool in addition to his work. It was pretty amazing. So, okay, tell everybody where they can see your work. If you have a shop, if you have a link, I will put it all in your show notes, but say it anyway.
Oh, great. All right. Yeah. So you can find my shop on Etsy. It's um, petulantprints.etsy.com. You can also follow me on Instagram. I'd really like that. Give me a little validation once in a while. I make nifty stuff sometimes. I
Yeah, leave
repeat,
some comments.
I make nifty stuff sometimes.
Yes.
Um,
I love it. I love it. Your work is super cool. It's really fun, and then you get that completely opposite side too. And I feel like a lot of people will really understand that and connect to it if they get to your page, you know, because we're not all happy all the time, and we're not all bad all the time or sad all the time. And you have something for everybody there. It's just like this beautiful extreme, and visually stunning, super fun. And I love the creepiness. It's just like my thing. So I really appreciate you jumping on this interview and being part of the show. And I look forward to seeing more of your work. I'm going to keep following you.
oh, thank you so much. Speaking of validation, making me all flustered.